They were born in palaces of gold and marble, daughters of kings, symbols of beauty and divine power. Their every step was watched, their every word measured. To the world, they lived lives of luxury. But behind the glittering walls of the Persian Empire, fear lived quietly in their hearts. The wedding day, the day the empire celebrated, was for them the day of silence, obedience, and dread. Tonight we uncover the truth, why Persian princesses feared their wedding night. In ancient Persia, marriage for a royal woman was never about love. It was a matter of politics, a tool for alliances and power. From the moment a princess was born, her life was mapped out by the ambitions of her father, the king. Her smile could buy peace with another kingdom. Her hand could strengthen the loyalty of a general. She was not seen as a daughter or a woman, but as a promise, a contract sealed with her own future. The royal weddings looked magnificent from the outside. Musicians played, torches lit the sky, and silk carpets covered the marble floors. But as the people danced and feasted, the bride sat quietly, her heart heavy with the weight of duty. She knew that once the ceremony ended, her childhood would vanish forever. She was no longer the king's daughter. She was now the property of another man. What frightened her most was not the ceremony itself, but what came after it, the wedding night. In the world of the Persian court, purity was sacred, almost holy. Before marriage, every royal bride was tested to prove her virginity. The process was humiliating and invasive, overseen by older palace women or priests. It was not about health, it was about honor. If any doubt arose, her family could face disgrace, and the princess herself could be punished, even killed. And then came the night of the wedding, the night that every Persian princess was taught to fear. The man waiting for her was usually much older, often a warrior or a political figure with power over her life. There was no tenderness, no romance, only expectation. The first night was not seen as a union of two souls, but as proof of obedience and control. The princess's fear was not just of pain or shame, but of the knowledge that from that night onward, she no longer belonged to herself. The Persian kings ruled with absolute authority. Their word was law, and their will could bend tradition itself. Some dynasties took the idea of royal bloodline purity to dangerous extremes. To keep divine favor within the family, marriages between close relatives became accepted, even between siblings. Ancient historians like Herodotus recorded that some Persian kings married their sisters, believing it would preserve the sacred blood of the gods. For the princesses, it was not devotion but despair. To refuse was treason, to obey was horror. Imagine being told that your wedding night would be with your own brother, and that the entire empire celebrated it as destiny. There was no escape, only silence. Before that fateful night, the princess was prepared through elaborate rituals. She was bathed in rose water, dressed in white silk, her hair perfumed and braided with golden threads. Priests recited prayers to Ahura Mazda, blessing her body and soul. It looked like holiness, but it was really submission. The white cloth symbolized surrender. The gold represented the chain of loyalty. She was no longer herself. She was the property of her husband and the will of the empire. Many brides were still teenagers, barely 14 or 15. They entered the royal chamber trembling, surrounded by guards and attendants outside the door, making sure that the ritual of union was completed. There was no comfort in that moment, only fear. To displease her husband meant humiliation, punishment, even exile. A single rumor could destroy her forever. So she smiled, obeyed, and accepted her fate. Like countless royal women before her, some of these princesses later became queens. Yet even that title did not bring freedom. The story of Atossa, daughter of Cyrus the Great, is one of both power and captivity. She was intelligent, respected, and the mother of kings, but she lived every day under watchful eyes. In the royal harem, every movement was observed, every conversation reported. The harem was not just a home, it was a golden prison. The queens wore crowns but walked behind walls. They could not step outside without permission. Their letters were read, their visitors controlled. They lived surrounded by luxury and silence. Publicly, they were adored, smiling at ceremonies, glittering in jewels, but behind the curtains, many wept alone. They remembered that first night, the moment when fear entered their lives and never left. The palace, glowing with lamps and music, hid countless quiet tears. Centuries passed, empires fell and rose again, but the voices of these women never reached the history books. The kings were remembered in stone inscriptions and on coins. The queens were remembered only in whispers. Yet the poets of Persia, those who dared to feel deeply, carried their pain into verse. They wrote of caged birds singing behind golden bars, of gardens that bloomed in silence, of moons that wept behind clouds. These were not just metaphors of love, they were the coded cries of women who could never speak their truth. Even archaeologists today find traces of forgotten queens, jewelry buried with no name, letters written in secret languages, fragments of poems carved into walls. Their stories were erased from the records, but not from time. Every hidden artifact tells us the same thing, that even in the world of kings, women carried the burden of silence. When we imagine ancient Persia, we picture might and beauty, the tall columns of Persepolis, the glittering crowns, the endless deserts of gold. But behind that image lay a darker world where even princesses lived in chains. They were admired, but never free, powerful and titled, yet powerless in life. Their wedding night, celebrated by the empire, was for them the end of freedom and the beginning of submission. Yet somehow, despite everything, these women endured. They raised future kings, advised rulers, and passed down wisdom quietly through generations. Their strength did not roar, it whispered. Their courage was not written in history books, but it lived in the hearts of their descendants. They were the unseen architects of empires, the silent pillars of power. So, when you hear the tales of Persian glory, the battles, the victories, the golden crowns, remember the women who lived behind the curtains, the ones who smiled through fear and carried entire dynasties on their shoulders. Their beauty was praised, their pain ignored, their voices lost in time. But their story remains, hidden in the shadows, waiting to be heard. Because history is not only the story of men who ruled, but also of women who endured. The Persian princesses, whose wedding nights were filled with fear, left behind a legacy not of conquest, but of quiet strength. Their silence shaped empires, and their endurance became the secret foundation of a civilization. And that is the dark truth behind the golden walls of ancient Persia.